Hello and welcome to another edition of the Paranormal Concept Show. I'm your host Paul Rook, and as always, we are exclusive to the PAK Radio Network. We are joined in the studio today by the stupendous Kerry Greenaway and Richard Clements. Hello, guys.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. How have you both been this week?
We've been all right, actually, haven't we, Kerry? We
We
went on a
have.
little expedition yesterday, which was really nice. A place I've never been to.
Oh no, yeah, I've
Yeah,
seen all the
Hever
photographs.
Castle. It's one
Yeah.
of Kerry's favourite places, isn't it, my dear?
It most certainly is, and it is 500 years since
You've
Anne
been there
Boleyn.
last.
No, I know it feels like it. No, 500 years of the Tudors being there, basically.
Excellent.
Yeah,
The
what the
Boleyn
Boleyn
family.
family.
Yeah,
Yes,
Anne
it's
Boleyn.
one of the many places she's supposed to haunt as well, isn't it? In the gardens, isn't it?
It is. There's a walk called the Anne Boleyn Walk, which we did, and it's beautiful. I love it. I just love it. You know, Catherine the Great some of it was filmed there as well.
All right.
Yeah, a lot
Yeah,
of
you can
programs
see
were
why.
there.
Yeah. We liked it a lot, didn't we, Richard?
Yes, we did. We did. We had a nice walk around lunch and everything. Just took it nice and easy. And I don't think I frightened Kerry too much actually driving there and back. I was very
There
good.
wasn't too bad. Getting home, it was busier, and it's not on you. It's more on the lorries that freak me out. But I just didn't look. I chose not to look. It's how I dealt with that.
One piece. That's the main thing.
I dealt with that. So go check over the Paranormal Concept Facebook page. You'll see the live we did there, and you'll see photographs we took while we were there, to see how amazingly beautiful that place is.
Yeah, we're all on there. Yeah, we couldn't actually go live from there, could we? Because it was sort of like the reception wasn't that good. So we done a record and Kerry posted it up after the event. But, you know, some people seem to like it anyway.
Yeah. Well, I love it there. I have to say, it is my second home. I've decided
Oh, right.
I will be moving in next week. If only, right? If only.
If only,
It is a
yeah.
stunning, stunning building.
As long as they've got the internet and you can carry on doing the shows, that's fine.
Yeah, that is a little bit of a tricky one. Mind you, I think if you was like on the top level of the castle ridge.
Yeah, you probably would get a good signal from up there. Yeah, I should imagine so.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe.
Sure.
Now, I will say this. I just want to give a little shout out, right? Because I'm super excited, or have been super excited, because on Friday, Stranger Things Part 2 got released. Eek! Is all I'm going to say to that.
Oh, no.
I am not giving no spoilers out.
Good.
Have watched
I've
it.
not seen it yet.
No. I'm not giving no spoilers out, but eek! All I'm saying, guys.
I shall be watching it straight after this show.
Oh, right. So, yeah.
I see, Rich. I see we're going to get dumped for a TV programme. You know,
Yeah, that's right. But I've only just started watching Stranger Things, so it's going to take me a little bit of a while to catch up. Because what you on now? Season 4, is it?
Yes, Part 2.
Part 2.
Yeah, I've just gone through 4 episodes of season 1, so it's going to take me a little while.
I can't believe you've only done 4 episodes. I like that binged it in about 3 days.
So did I.
From the beginning, I watched the first half of season 4 and then had to go back and watch the other 3 seasons again.
Right.
Because I just love it. I think it's so good. I have to give a big shout out to Tom Jobson for introducing me to Stranger Things, because he went, "Have you not seen it?" I was like, "No." He's like, "We're so watching that." I was like, "Oh God, okay, I can't believe you missed that. That was years ago."
There is actually another show on streaming services out there that Netflix in particular that I found today as well, and I know it's going to please Kerry so much.
I'm a little excited.
Yeah, Pirate Gold of Adak Island.
Oh God, no!
Brilliant.
I saw that. I thought, oh no, not
What's that,
another one.
Netflix?
It's on Netflix. Yeah, it's about a pirate or something that buried his gold on this island. And as always, these treasure hunters are going to go and look for it.
Oh right, yeah.
I did see that, and I thought, God, that's got Paul's Rook's name all over
Oh,
it.
Binge watch
absolutely.
all 8 episodes and they still don't come up with the treasure. Yeah,
Yeah, that's the
Mm.
one. Yeah,
been there, done it.
8
like they're right.
seasons later, they're still digging the beach up.
Absolutely. I mean, there's in the history books that it has been written that people have found things in there on
Of
the
course they have.
island, but I think that's it.
Well, it keeps people like you watching.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Anyway, tonight's show is going to be a little bit different. We are looking at the concepts and history and folklore and tales of haunted prisons. So I'm going to kick the show off right. Prisons around the world are not the nicest of places, right?
No, they're not. I mean, and you know, they seem to be on the #1 list of all sort of paranormal researchers and investigators. I mean, if anyone can get access to a prison, then everyone seems to sort of gravitate towards them. You know, because I think they hold. You know, if this phenomenon we experience with sort of ghosts and the paranormal is somehow fueled by emotion and sort of what happens at places in the past, then I feel that prisons really do tick all those boxes.
Paul?
Yeah, I mean, I think out of the whole world, I think our prisons are probably the best ones because, like, it seems that most of the people that in the UK prisons have a cushy life, don't they?
Now,
Yeah.
but I think you have to be part of it to understand that. But there was a movement. I mean, at the end of the day, there's been a movement over the years
Hmm.
of rather than places of punishment to reform.
Yeah,
And that's where the focus has changed. So you're not looking to punish people, you're looking to reform them so they are able to enter society and become, you know, a benefit to society.
yeah,
I think it depends on the crime whether the society wants them back.
Again, you have to kind of look at it through the spectrum of age and cultural influences and attitudes and belief systems, as with anything. I mean, some of the prisons we're going to talk about tonight are old ones. Some of them, come through into the present. It's
Mm.
it's a difficult one. I kind of with Richard on this. I think if there is something to be said about emotional imprinting on the environment, you're
Yeah,
kind of going to get it in a prison.
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
With
Now,
sort of like the whole breadth of people that get sent to prison, you know, your violent offenders, your petty thieves, you know. So you know, it does sort of capture a broad sort of you know, a broad aspect of society. Sort of go, you know, these prisons.
mm, and they
Yeah.
they generally cross quite a lot of years. So you're
Mm.
looking at
Yeah.
an evolution in attitude within the prison.
Hmm.
I mean, there are nowadays, prisons are not what they used to be.
No.
I think bring them back.
In some countries, they're still the same. You only got to look at world's toughest prisons on
Yeah.
Netflix to God, we should be getting
Yeah.
paid by Netflix at this rate to see the variety of different prison systems around the world.
Yeah.
They're not all the same. Um, Lots of different ways of doing things, and in some of them, it does kind of take you back to old school, what we would have done. Now, we did do a show on wholly on Newgate Prison.
Yeah.
So that was right back in the early days of starting the show on this channel. So go over, check that out, because that's a fascinating place in
Where
its
can
own
they
right.
find that show, Kerry?
Paranormalconcept.com.
Done.
I know, right? That's our website. Everybody can go check that out. And Paul,
Yes,
you have investigated. We're not going to talk about this particular prison tonight, but you have investigated some prisons, haven't you?
I have. I've investigated 2 prisons. One is Shrewsbury Prison, also known as the Dana, and also what's that other one?
Shepton Mallet.
No, yeah, no, it was Shepton Mallet. Yeah, that's the other one. Yeah, that one was interesting, and I think I saw something that could be described as an apparition there.
Mm.
But to be honest, it looked like a white shadow moving up the stairs and like across the forecourt and up the stairs before it disappeared.
Mm.
That was an interesting experience.
I think there's a vibe. We talked about this before. We've talked about this before. Last week's show, we talked about it, about a resonance. Some of that's to do with the psychological prepping of the place,
Oh, yeah.
the psychological suggestion, should I say. You know, it's a prison. You
Um,
know that people have been trapped there, you know, like incarcerated, should I say.
yeah, but this is me you're talking about, and I didn't expect to see anything.
You
You know,
never expect to
like
see anything.
I'm not very psychic or anything like that, but I just saw this white mist, and it seemed to have a purpose of what it was doing.
Mm.
So it was like it appeared from the middle of the yard where they used to do all the walking about and stuff, and it came up to the staircase where we was at the top of the stairs, and it went halfway up the stairs before it disappeared.
Mm.
Now, if you believe in spirits and ghosts, then okay, it could have been a ghost, but then what's it a ghost of? It could have been a prisoner or a guard,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't expect any of that.
Mm.
The only suggestion there was that we're actually in a prison. So for me, it's a case of, well, I see something, I don't know what it is, but I can put it down to unexplained. I won't say it was I wouldn't say it was a ghost of a prisoner or anything like that, because I don't know what it was.
Mm.
It could have been a cook for all I know. So
Well, it wasn't defined enough for you to call what it was, but it is something you can't explain.
exactly, yeah.
And
And I'm not even gonna, because
Yeah.
of the suggestion where we was, it's quite
mm,
easy to say, oh, that was a guard, prison guard.
mm,
Um, and I still don't know, and I won't ever know.
no,
I just put it
it
down to one of those things.
it is one of those things, and who knows? But let's have a look at some of these haunted prisons that are really on the paranormal circuit. Quite frankly,
Yeah.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. You can't deny that they have a draw. That it's a kind of along the lines of a castle or something like that, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think some of them were castles to begin with.
Yeah, possibly. Well, we'll find out because we are going to have a little look at a few of them. Now, the first one on the list isn't actually in the UK, it's actually in America.
Yeah, Philadelphia, isn't it?
Hmm.
I like,
Exactly.
Quite a famous prison out there.
I
Hmm.
like Philadelphia. Wonderful cheese.
Eastern State Penitentiary.
Yeah.
Now, this period of time, we're hitting about 4 years after the American Revolutionary War. So we're looking at around 1787.
Hmm.
Okay, so around that time, then you actually had the Constitution being signed,
Yep.
correct?
Yep. There's a lot of anticipation around that time after the war. Yeah.
Hmm. But around that time, there was also a group of people that were debating prison reform at the same time. Now,
Right.
this was in particular looking at something, the Walnut Street jail. Okay,
Hmm.
now it's actually directly behind Independence Hall. Now,
Right.
the conditions there were absolutely disgraceful. It was one of those where men, women, children, regardless of their crime, got chucked in together
Yeah.
into like pens rather than cells.
Hence
And
penitentiary, I should imagine.
pardon?
Hence penitentiary.
Mm, yeah. Um, and it's not the greatest conditions in the world. So it's disease ridden. As I say, they didn't segregate the men, women, or children or their crime. So a thief would be in with a murderer, a rapist would be in with a horse thief. Do you know what I mean? It was all
Yeah.
sort of in together. And because of that, the conditions within the pens were worse to awful.
Yeah.
Now, the jailers didn't do anything to help the prisoners,
Nope.
and they were. Now, I didn't realise this fact. They sold the prisoners alcohol, 20 gallons in a day. Not to one
Yeah.
person, obviously, across the board. But they, and we saw this in Newgate as well.
Yeah.
If you had money in these prisons and you were tough enough to keep hold of your money, because there's that side of it as well, yeah, then you were able to buy things to make your stay a little bit better. But you're looking at the worst of the worst. You can't have any morals in that circumstance. You're not going to be able, like, if you're chucked in a cell with all these like people and you've got money, you're going to have to hold on to that money. So you're fighting for existence. It's a survival scenario. So if you've got money, you can get alcohol or food or clothing or even heating. Okay, you can get those things for a price.
And this is how a lot of the jailers used to subsidise their income.
Now, obviously, the poorer people that haven't got access to the money would die from the cold or the starvation.
Yeah.
Well, this led to a group of citizens called themselves the Philadelphia Society for Alleviating the Miseries of Public Prisons, said that this is not right. This can't go on, basically. So what they wanted to do was reform the prison service. Now, what they didn't just change the prison system in Pennsylvania, it kind of gave a different perspective to prison systems. They said across the globe, but it's more to do with the Western globe.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, the founder, William Penn, was a Quaker.
Yes, Philadelphia. Yeah, a lot of Quakers went over there in the early years of settlement. Yeah.
So, do we know the values of Quakers?
Well, you can imagine Quakers actually setting out to do something like this because it is sort of things they do. They're there to actually sort of help people and make the world a better place around them.
Okay, so
I thought they were about 38p a pack, weren't they?
that's the porridge.
Oh, Quavers.
Oh, Quavers. No, Quaker. Oh, God. Quaver. No, Quaker values are this, right? They believe that Stop it, Paul. You're naughty. God. Right, so Quaker belief systems are, they believe that the truth is continually revealed. They believe in seeking peace with oneself and others. They accept and respect each individual's uniqueness. They have a belief in the spirituality of life. They have a belief in the value of simplicity and the belief in the power of silence. I would not do well, I'll be honest with you, in regards to the power of silence. I probably wouldn't do very well in a Quaker.
Yeah, because they also, I think Quakers, when they attend their meeting houses, which they call them, they all sit in a circle and say nothing and all sort of meditate, I think.
I'd be like, excuse me, hello, someone got anything to say? No, the rest of it I can get, but the power of silence I'd have an issue with. Now, William Penn, as I say, brought those kind of values to the new colony. He didn't like the British North America, which was a harsher criminal code.
Yeah.
Basically, death was the standard punishment for a lot of crimes. Sodomy, kidnapping, denying the true God, basically. So Penn relied on imprisonment, but with hard labour, work hard. Yeah.
Yeah.
He retained the death penalty only for murder. Now, in 1718, that was the founder of the prison system. In 1718, they did away with his Quaker-based system and basically brought in the harsher kind of punishment.
Yeah, retribution, yeah.
So it was more corporal or capital punishment. Now, it was 70 years before anyone would try to get away, to do away with the penal code. Now, Dr. Benjamin Rush, he was a Philadelphian physician and had an interest in politics, and he served in the Second Continental Congress, signed the Declaration of Independence, and he was the one that would lead the ratification of the federal Constitution. He was outspoken, and he earned the title of Father of American Psychiatry for his groundbreaking observations about diseases of the mind.
Oh yes, oh that's it's very I like the way they put it, diseases of the mind.
Now, when he was in London, he trained in London in 1768, and he ran into Benjamin Franklin. Now, Benjamin Franklin, as we know, was an agent of Parliament for the Pennsylvania Assembly, right? And he was actually quite a bit of a celebrity among the Parisians.
Yes.
So he urged Rush to cross the English Channel to experience this enlightened thinking. I love that. In the French parlours. Ooh la la. He did, of course. He was like, oh, going there, that sounds great. He mingled with scientists, philosophers, the literati. He listened to progressive European theories about crime punishment, and he took those back to America with him. And this is where we then get to 1787, and he comes back to America and says, right, we need radical change, and it's not just in Walnut Street Jail, but over the world. He said that crime was a moral disease, and he suggested a house of repentance where basically, rather than, and this is where we change from corporal punishment, the punishment side of things, retribution for your crime that you've done, to reform.
Yeah.
Because he said that the prisoners could meditate on their crimes, experience spiritual remorse, and undergo rehabilitation. Yeah.
Yeah. So not have it the emphasis on punishment, it's, as I say, it's the emphasis on to rehabilitate the criminal, not to punish them.
Exactly. It's called the Pennsylvania system. Yeah, so this is the Pennsylvania Prison Society agreed, and they set out to convince everybody else of this. Okay, so changes were then made at the Walnut Street Jail, because if you're going to talk about it, you've got to do it, right? If you're going to lead the way in regards to reformation. So they started by... Sorry, honey?
Lead by example.
Exactly. So the Pennsylvania Reform Society decided that, okay, so the Walnut Street Jail is the one that we're going to do. Repeat. They started by segregating the sexes.
Right.
Then and crimes as well, not just the sexes, but crimes as well. So more violent crimes were separated from lesser crimes. Women and children were separated from men, the men. And they put workshops in place, vocational workshops, to occupy the prisoners' time. A lot of the abusive behaviour was abolished, but unfortunately, at this time, the prison wasn't very big and the population was growing. So obviously crimes were increasing. So the prison was becoming a little overrun. So they needed a grander scale. They needed a bigger prison.
Yeah.
Okay. And they also said for repentance to truly happen, complete isolation of each prisoner would be needed, basically. And you couldn't do that in overcrowded jails.
Yeah, one prisoner, one cell they're obviously looking at trying to achieve, weren't they?
Mm-hmm. So they began the construction of the Eastern State Penitentiary on a cherry orchard outside of Philadelphia in 1822. Now, the architect was a British guy, Mr. John Haviland, and basically he had 7 wings of individual cell blocks radiating out from a central hub.
So it'd be like the spokes of a wheel, wouldn't it?
Yeah. It opened in 1829. That was 7 years before completion. And they said it was a technological marvel. It had central heating, flush toilets, shower baths in each private cell. Now, at the time, the penitentiaries had those things that other big buildings that you would imagine would have them didn't have, like the White House, for example.
Yeah, they didn't have sort of heating or flushing toilets by the sounds of it.
Yeah. Now, the first inmate at the Eastern State Penitentiary was a guy called Charles Williams. He was a farmer. He was sentenced to 2 years for theft. 1829, October the 23rd, he was escorted into the prison with a hood placed over his head. Basically, that was to ensure, didn't do a very good job because we know who he is, secure his anonymity and segregation into society upon release. So basically, you got, if you went into the prison, you were like, you gave them a chance upon release.
Yeah.
Because you didn't know who was in there. Plus, also, it doesn't give you a chance to see the layout of things and know how to get out, basically. Now, Williams never saw the prison beyond his own private cell, so communication with the guards was done through a small feeding hole. They lived in complete isolation with a Bible as their only possession, and they gave them tasks like shoemaking or weaving to occupy their time. I find this a little... Well, it's a naive thing, do you not feel?
Well, they have workshops in prisons. I mean, and even today, you know, so it's only sort of, you know, basic sort of menial tasks, isn't it, that and they're asked to do, you know, as a way of sort of earning their keep.
I don't object to people earning their keep, but the complete isolation with just the Bible and work.
Well, yeah, I mean...
No, I mean, let's face it. I mean, well, if we're talking about like really tough, hardened criminals that have like murdered someone or something, they deserve that. Deserve to be removed from society and, you know, only doing stuff that earns their keep, like breaking rocks and things to be laid down for train lines and whatever.
You have a very black and white view of things,
No,
Paul.
no, I'm saying for the hardened criminals like paedophiles and rapists and murderers, I think that's quite acceptable. For someone that's just like stolen a loaf of bread to try and feed their family, then okay, maybe go for the reform stuff.
Well,
You know, it's a slap on the wrist. Don't do it again. You've been given like 3 weeks inside for it.
yeah, but you've got this farmer sentenced to 2 years for theft, and this
Yeah,
is...
but that's what I mean. Slap him on the wrist. Don't do it again, and then let him go. That's fine. But for the real bad criminals, then that's all they deserve. Bowl of water and a bit of bread.
Okay. Well, Alec de Tocqueville praised the concept in his 1831 trip, and he said, quote, "Can there be a combination more powerful for reformation than solitude? This leads a prisoner through reflection to remorse, through religion to hope, makes him industrious by idleness." Others agreed. 300 prisons throughout Europe and South America, Russia, China, and Japan would actually end up being based on the Eastern State Penitentiary.
Yeah, so it sort of led the way, didn't it, to sort of like what you could possibly sort of the modern prison system, didn't you?
Charles Dickens, however, in 1842 wrote, "I am persuaded that those who designed this system do not know what it is they are doing. I hold the slow and daily tampering with the mysteries of the mind to be immeasurably worse than any torture of the body."
Right.
So I do think, you know, the prisons these days, I think they need to look at it as well again, because there are people out there with the thought that, especially on the poverty line, that they are actually better off in prison. If they're suffering on the poverty line, their chances are they're not eating day to day, you know, and they have like one meal every couple of days or so because they can't afford it. But if you go inside, you'll get 3 meals a day, regular exercise, you get your TV and everything all paid for. It's a lot cushier inside than it is outside.
God, you sound like my father.
Oh, it's all right. There's too soft sometimes these days.
Anyway.
Anyway, we're talking about the history of prisons, so yeah, this is the way it was. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's go back that way. Let's bring it back.
Okay, well, basically doubts regarding this particular way of the Reformation that they'd done. So they changed it again. So the system of isolation and penitence changed. They started to have prisoners sharing cells, working together, playing in organised sports. This is what I mean, right? If you're looking at reformation for somebody, isolating them is not going to help them integrate back into society. We're not talking murderers and the worst of the worst. We're talking like the petty thief, those kind of level people. They've got to be able to integrate back into society and given a second chance. People make mistakes, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And need
those sort of people are the ones that need the reform.
exactly. So by the isolation method with just a Bible and work to fulfill them, that's not preparing them. Yes, it gives them time for reflection, but it doesn't necessarily allow integration back to society. And if say some of the reasons you committed the crime was because of, I don't know, an emotional imbalance, how are you going to learn to be with other people and respect them and not lose your temper and, I don't know, do whatever it is that you did to react? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're not going to unless you integrate with other people. And yes, although you're integrating with other prisoners, there is it's a controlled environment. So to then introduce contact with other people to change it again into living and working together.
Mm-hmm.
And also, how difficult would solitary confinement be to maintain? You can't.
I think it's one of these things that you're never going to have the right answer.
No, it's difficult.
No matter what they do, they're still going to come up against problems. I mean, fair enough that they could keep someone in solitary. I mean, they use it these days for like a punishment. They send them down to be in solitary confinement for 2 weeks if they misbehave or something. But not everyone wants to reform. Not everyone wants to sit there and soul search and stuff like that. So it swings and roundabouts at the end of the
But
day.
not everybody has the capability.
Yeah.
That's the thing, because we're so formed in our early years in regards to our morals and our ethics and our conscience, like we learn the right and wrong. And if you have trauma, now bearing in mind, we're not talking back in those days, we're talking about a very different landscape to what we deal with now.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, sort of like the crime and everything. Yeah.
Everything's, you've got to keep it in mind of the cultural influence at the time. We've talked about this before. You're in a survival state. We're very lucky nowadays. You can't look at it through the spectrum of today. You have to look at it through the spectrum of then. So, although I kind of understand why the solitary confinement system was an idea, and they brought, as I say, they brought in the segregation of crimes and segregation of sexes in that bit's, yeah, good, right? That works. But the problem is you have a rapid growth of society at that time.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes impossible to maintain because you've got too many people going into a prison.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, think about this, right? The prison itself was originally to hold 300 prisoners. By the 1920s, it was holding 2,000.
Yeah.
Now, they did construct more cells. They did ones below ground, but they had no lighting or plumbing. So it ends up being changing again. So solitary, like you go into solitary confinement, then becomes more about punishment than it does redemption.
And it also runs along the lines of a place like America back then its population was probably doubling every year, with the mass and immigration, and with that, a prison that originally 300 prisoners was probably sort of what they sort of took as being the average, that it could. But with the mass immigration, you have, crime is sure to rise along with rest of society, cost of living and all that.
Exactly. So that's basically where they were at. By the 1960s, the Eastern State Penitentiary was actually falling apart, and in 1971, it was officially closed by the state of Pennsylvania. It ran as 142 years as a penitentiary. It held 75,000 inmates.
Right.
What,
Seven,
its entire life? Or,
so it's 142 years, yeah.
Yeah.
so that's a lot to hold in like through that many years.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. It's a lot of people gone through the walls.
Yeah.
Even Al Capone was there.
Oh, they had some of the big knobs then.
Yeah. Now, in 1965, it was declared a National Historical Landmark, and it was opened as a historic site in 1994. Okay. So then we ask the question, right? Okay, so that's your basic history of it. A lot of changes within there, a lot of evolution. A hell of a lot of people have gone through those doors. You've got everything, like Paul says, from murderer to
Petty
petty
thieves.
thief, yeah, rapist. You've got everything in there, or gone through those walls. Is it haunted?
That's the big question, isn't it? A lot of people think so.
A lot of people do. It has featured.
Define haunted.
It has featured. I'm ignoring that question. It has featured on several television shows. So it's been on the Travel Channel's Ghost Adventures, Most Haunted Live, Sci-Fi Ghost Hunters, MTV's Fear. It is a location that many paranormal researchers or investigators have been every year, and it's supposed to have lots of strange things happen.
Ooh, this is getting down to the nuts and bolts of it now, aren't we?
Cell block number 12 is known for echoing voices and cackling. I do love a cackle. Cell block 6, shadow figures dart along the walls. Cell block 4, ghostly faces. You've got many people reporting silhouettes of a guard, reminiscent of what you experienced, Paul. Footsteps, wails, whispers, and it's not just once. These are stories that are done time and time again. Is it imagination then?
Big buildings, yes. You can probably sort of rationalise away, sort of like a lot of sort of like the eeriness, the coldness of the place. It all depends on how much sort of they've done to restore and make it safe. But if it's sort of still in its rundown disrepair, I'm sure the imagination has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, I'll go.
Paul?
I'll go with that. To be fair, but there is,
Imagination.
yeah, I mean there is a lot of emotions as well that have run through that building throughout its entire life.
Because it's a location, you can say to people, right, we're going to this location, we're not going to tell you anything about it. You turn up, you think, oh, it's an old prison. I mean, that instantly sort of drums up all sorts of things, doesn't it?
It does.
Even the most, even the most uneducated of people will know what a prison is, and and quite possibly as what has gone on there in the past.
But I mean, if you're a believer in something like the stone tape theory, where you believe that emotions can be absorbed by the bricks and mortar, so to speak, you can pick up. Some people can pick up on those emotions. I mean, okay, it might not be the stone tape theory, because I know, Kerry, you're not very good. You don't like that theory. But that's not to say that there's not something in it. It might not be bricks and mortar that's picking up, holding this energy. It could be something else that we're just not thought of yet. And people can, you walk into the middle of a room and like you can instantly feel if there's tension in the air. So maybe it's that sort of thing.
know. I don't know. I'm not a fan of the stone tape theory because I think you have to look at the mechanics of that, but I wouldn't necessarily dismiss it. But like you said, I think there's probably a different explanation than the one that everybody goes to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Most people would go to the stone tape theory because that's
Yeah.
quite popular in held belief. But you, as I said to you, you could walk into a room after someone's had an argument, and you can pick up on the tension right away. Where's that energy coming from? Where are you picking that energy up from? Is it something a bit, if not stone tape theory, then another type of theory like that?
Mm.
But we just don't know. We just don't investigate that sort of stuff, do we?
It's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Now, there is a very famous tale from a guy called Gary Johnson. Now, he actually helps to maintain the building at their place. Now, in the 1990s, he had opened an old lock in cell block 4, and he says a force gripped him so tightly that he was unable to move. He described a negative, horrible energy that exploded out of the cell. He said tormented faces appeared on the cell walls, and that one form in particular beckoned to him. That's an experience and a half, right?
That is, yeah. To be rendered
a bit like, reminds me a little bit of sleep paralysis.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, whether you can have sleep paralysis when being fully awake, possibly.
But still raises a question, right? If he's telling the truth, did he have to change his trousers afterwards?
I don't know that part. He hasn't divulged.
Didn't.
Anyway, all I can say on this one is they don't say the Eastern State Penitentiary is haunted. They just say they run a haunted attraction.
Yeah.
Which a lot of people do. Like, a lot of companies that sell ghost hunts will say it's a experience. Do you know what I mean? And it's just an experience.
That's all you can promise someone, really, is an experience. Because even if you don't have an unexplained experience, you've still got the experience of going to one of these places.
Exactly. I mean, one of the things is, like, at the end of the day, if you think it's haunted, it can sometimes be a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
If you want something to be haunted, then your imagination is going to make sure that you experience something.
Yeah.
Particularly if you've got a team of people pushing the suggestion of that. Did you hear that?
Yeah.
Did you see that? Let's do a seance with candles. Oh, that lights up the room and makes a spooky atmosphere and moving light sources.
Every time I've been on an event, and I used to run them like monthly, people would be like, "Oh, did you hear that?" And I'm like, "No. All I heard was you going, did you hear that?" Like, will you be quiet?
Yeah. We're doing an EVP session here, don't you know?
Yeah, exactly. Middle of an EVP session, and someone's like, "Oh, did you hear that?" No.
I know, right? Funny old world. But that is the life and times of a haunted experience, quite frankly, a haunted event or a haunted location. And you will only know unless you go, right? Eastern State Penitentiary. Exactly. That's that one. So let's have a look at Port Arthur in Tasmania. We're going right down south again, guys.
Yeah, we're going to the southern hemisphere.
It was in 1827 that the Lieutenant Governor Arthur proposed the idea of starting a penal settlement on the Tasman Peninsula. Now, this is perfect for convicts because the only way to get there over land involved crossing a narrow isthmus. What is an isthmus?
An isthmus is, it's quite self-explanatory. It's a narrow piece of land that connects, like a peninsula, to the mainland.
Yeah.
So basically, you're living at the bottom, so if you do escape, you've got to cross this very narrow piece of land, which would make it quite easy to defend against,
It's easily guarded.
Yeah, defended, guarded, yeah. So
I would have said it's a big guy that gives you presents, like Father Christmas.
Oh, God. Now, Carnarvon Bay was also a good site too, and it's on the western shore of Port Arthur. It's a natural harbour. So that means that ships could easily reach the settlement to bring the convicts and supplies in and take away timber, coal, and the other resources that that area offers.
Right, yeah.
Okay, so this is where you're building up like a little town for the convicts. Right, so in 1830, a timber station was started at what would become Port Arthur. Now, 3 years later, it became the penal colony, mainly for repeat offenders.
Right.
Now, the first commandant of Pirates of the Caribbean style is what I thought when I read that, was Charles O'Hara Booth.
All right.
Now, his first house was just basically a cottage that overlooked the settlement. It ended up being a more permanent structure because obviously he is a commandant after all.
Yeah.
That's right.
And it's still a well-preserved museum.
Awesome.
If you want to go, by the way, everybody. Now, the dockyard, complete with the master shipwright's house, was built soon afterwards. And basically, the Van Diemen's Lands was the busiest shipyard between 1834 and 1848.
All right. Van Diemen's Land being the old name for Tasmania.
Now, there were 3 convict-built dockyards in the British Empire. So the convicts, again, we've got this work. They're
Work
working.
ethic, yeah.
We're working convicts here, and they built all the ships that came from there. Now, when they first started, they wouldn't have had the skills, but they were trained and to make the ships rather. Now, a lot of them were boys rather than men, and they grew up learning the skills to make the ships. Now, the
Right.
boys came from the boys' penitentiary that was founded at Point Pure. That's across the bay. And in 1834, it was to teach these convicts a trade. So once they were released, they could go and become again, a benefit to society.
Yeah.
Yeah, and have a skill when they left as well.
Yeah, the first master shipwright was Mr. John Watson, and in 1836 was replaced by a guy called David Hoy, who held the post until 1848. Now, they were really committed to their work. They took a great pride in it, and they were quite influential in helping the convicts turn their lives around.
Yeah,
I mean, the age of these guys are boys, so this is young. And one of the pupils of Walter Paisley was 13.
Yeah, it's young.
It is ever so young, isn't it? And he was sent there for housebreaking. That's what his crime was. He was sent to Point Pure, and then he was sent to do the ship making. Now, he was rebellious, often spent time in solitary confinement. So again, we have the solitary confinement. And then basically, he never really managed to stay out of trouble. Now, when 1871, he was 52. He built a wooden dinghy. Now, that you can see in the Hobart's Maritime Museum of Tasmania.
Cool.
The dockyards themselves weren't built near the normal settlement. They were like the main settlement. They were away from that. So to keep the convicts away from the main population. So they had things like their own churches. Now the convict church accommodated over 1,000 people. Never was consecrated though.
Right.
Now, while it was under construction, a murderer, William Riley, murdered another inmate called Joseph Shuttleworth with a pickaxe, as you do.
Yeah,
Right?
to swing the axe.
He said, "I am satisfied." He didn't say why he killed him. And he got hung for that deed.
Good.
Now, this is interesting. We talked about bells in an earlier show, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yes.
We've done a show on bells, famous bells. Now, he was hung at 4 p.m. on a Monday afternoon. Apparently, ghosty tale coming up, you can hear ghosty church bells ringing near the site.
Oh, right.
Right, now I remembered what we talked about in the bells show about bells ringing underwater.
Yeah, they can't,
right?
basically.
Well, they can't. I had to test this today.
Yes, you tested it again, did you?
I had to test it again. I had to really jingle jangle my bell. to get any sort of noise. And if I was just like swishing the water like it would be if it was like a tide type thing, nothing, not a single solitary thing. But this isn't saying it's underwater. They're just saying it's ghosty church bells.
Yeah.
But I revisited, is what I can say about that
You've
one.
done a bit of experimentation, yeah.
Had to do a little bit of a revisitation on that one. Now, the hospital, there was a hospital there as well, was built between 1841 and 1842. And it was the third hospital that was built at the settlement. It had a morgue, laundry, kitchen, baking room, and the first medical officer arrived in 1832.
Right.
And basically, he wasn't just a physical healer, he was also responsible for their spiritual wealth too. His name was Dr. Thomas Coke Brownell, and he left in 1833. But he did go back twice more to serve as a medical officer.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's like a little community they tried to build up, didn't it?
Yeah.
Because if you've got prisoners, then it is in your interest to keep, to provide good medical attention, especially if they're working for you.
Exactly.
Hmm.
But also, you think the age, the boys, do you know what I mean? They're trying to create a reformation and give them a skill to, and yeah, some of them stayed for years and years and years.
Yeah.
But I would imagine you become a little bit constitutionalized.
I think that's institutionalized.
Institutionalized. Yeah. Constitutionalized. Institutionalized.
Get to see that in in a film called Shawshank Redemption.
Mm.
There's
Yeah.
like an old fella that has literally lived his whole life in prison,
Mm-hmm.
and then when he comes out, he just can't cope
Yeah.
with society, and he hangs himself.
Yeah. It's a massive change
Yeah,
if you've been in the system a long time.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, there were civil officer houses, there were parsonages, there was an accountant's house, there was a Roman Catholic chaplain house, there were magistrates, there was a surgeon's house. There's lots of different, like you say, it's like a proper little settlement.
Yeah.
And it is quite photographed. I mean, it's well known in this particular area.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there was I think this is quite telling as well. Now, there was a flour mill and a granary, and the plan was to supply the daily bread of the convict population.
Yeah.
Now, bearing in mind, in 1844, there were 3,500 people there. So it's quite a big settlement, shall we say. Unfortunately, it was a failure between 1854 and 1857. So the building was then converted into more penitentiary, so they could accommodate more prisoners, basically.
Yeah.
Further inland is a separate prison, which was built in 1850, and by then the authorities had decided that the floggings and other physical punishments weren't the way to reform convicts, so they went for psychological punishment instead. So basically, if you were well behaved, you got extra food, and if you weren't, you only got bread and water.
Right.
They also liked the silent system, where a prisoner would be hooded and forced to stand in silence and think about the wrongs he had committed. You stand there and you think, it's like the naughty step. You stand there and you think about what you've done, young man. Right? But the other form of it was to spend 23 hours a day in their cells. When they were let out for exercise or church, they had to wear masks so they couldn't communicate.
That's right.
Even the warders wore slippers so you wouldn't, it was completely silent.
Yeah.
It can drive you mad, literally. One prisoner, William Carter, hanged himself in his cell because of that kind of treatment.
Yeah.
There was also a special punishment cell where a prisoner was let out for an hour after 4 days and spent his entire time in darkness, complete darkness.
Yeah. That must take its toll after a while.
Complete darkness, complete silence.
Yeah.
Nothing but your mind.
Yeah.
Crazy. They say that in that particular cell, you can hear the screams of a boy who spent 2 weeks in there. Oh, excuse me. While he was awaiting execution. I can't believe I just yawned on air.
No, normally that's Richard's job.
I know, normally that's Richard's job. Deary me. I don't even know why I'm tired. I've had 2 weeks off. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Now, one prisoner who had it better than most at Port Arthur was a guy called William Smith O'Brien. Now, he was the leader of the Young Ireland Rebellion. Do apologise for the background noise, everybody. Now, the Young Ireland movement was basically... That is not a ghost. That is my son. He has obviously just died in one of the matches that he's playing online or whatever. Oh my God, now he's swearing. Now, I'm going to talk louder. The Young Ireland nationalist movement of the 1840s began. A group of Irish intellectuals were founded and wrote for the nation. The movement advocated the study of Irish history and the revival of the Irish Gaelic language as a means of developing Irish nationalism and achieving independence. Now, he was actually, what's the word? I want to say commuted, but that's not the right word.
Sentenced.
No, where they sent them.
Oh, transported.
Transported, thank you, to Port Arthur. Now, he was sent to Maria Island. He tried to escape. Was betrayed, and then they sent him to Port Arthur in 1850. Now, he had a cottage. They gave him his own little cottage. That's now a museum. Again, that's at the south of the penitentiary. It was a stable, but it was converted to house him, basically. And he spent his days in the garden, reading and keeping a journal. But he was kept in isolation from the other prisoners and was there until 1854.
Right.
Now, you can't escape from this place. There were rumours, they spread rumours deliberately to stop people from doing this, basically, that the area or the waters around that area were infested by sharks. So the only escape route overland would be the Eagle Hawk Neck, which is where that isthmus that we talked about at the beginning joins the peninsula. And that's where the soldiers were stationed along both sides of the bay, and dogs were there. And there was also a semaphore station as well to talk about prisoners if they were trying to escape. So it's pretty impossible to do it. But it wasn't. Henry Singleton, also known as Richard Pinches, was in Port Arthur for the third time. He was in a separate prison when some of the guards decided to get drunk. They gave him a set of keys so he could let them in later on. Trusting guards, all I'm saying. He actually made copies of these keys, but then decided to hand them in instead. The guards obviously were fired.
Yeah.
I love that. We're just going to let us in later. We're going to go and have a drink. Love it. Now, Billy Hunt, he was a convict there, obviously, and he thought he would have a great idea. So he covered himself in a kangaroo hide, tried to hop across the isthmus. However, the soldiers didn't get a lot of food. They thought, ooh, kangaroo. It's my only attempt at an Australian accent I'm going to do. And basically thought, great, that'll supplement our diet. We'll get some of that kangaroo, and tried to shoot him. Yeah, thinking it was a kangaroo and not somebody. And basically, in the end, he had to throw off his disguise and say, look, I'm not a kangaroo. I'm actually a convict trying to escape. So they were like, oh, okay, well, we'll rearrest you then. Now, Martin Cash was a little more successful. He swam across the bay, but was quickly captured. And he made another attempt at escaping on Boxing Day with two of his inmates. They tied their clothes on the top of their heads into bundles under the top of their heads. God, just imagine it. And swam across the bay. They lost their bundles of clothing, so when they got out the other side, they were pretty naked. So they had to rob a road gang's hut for clothes, and they became a gang of outlaws known as Cash and Co.
All right.
Cash went to Hobart, got involved in a gunfight. That led to a constable's death. He was convicted of murder. He was about to be hung. He received a reprieve and was sent to Norfolk Island. He redeemed himself. He became a constable, got married, and ended up becoming an overseer at the Royal Tasmanian Botanical Gardens,
That,
what
All
to
right.
keep it in Christchurch in
that's
New
a bit of a
Zealand.
that's a bit of a rubbish name for a gang, is it? He could have called himself Cash and Carry.
Oh, I like that. Look at his career. Becomes a constable, got married, became an overseer at the Royal Tasmanian Botanical Gardens, then became a brothel keeper in Christchurch in New Zealand, and in 1863, a free man.
Right, there you go.
Brothel keeper. That's a trade.
Yeah.
Mm. Anyway, so you're building up quite a different perspective of a system here.
Yeah.
This is a lot more free. This is a lot more community based, even though they have prison type structures in place like solitary confinement and corporal punishment. And you've got a work ethic in there. They're building boats, they're giving them a trade, and they are looking for reformation and integration into society once they've done their job. Correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you've got like a community going on there.
Oh, yeah, it has everything a little small community needs, doesn't it?
It does. It wasn't sustainable though,
No.
because convict transportation ended in 1853. So most of the prisoners at that time in the colony were actually there for crimes that they had committed within the colony.
Yeah.
So they've been convicted, sent over, and then they've done something else in the colony, and then they've got another sentence to do that. Now, it was a centre of trade because of timber,
Yeah.
but by 1856, most of the timber in that area had been cut down. So they moved the sawmill and tramway rails to Port Arthur. That became the main producer of timber on the peninsula. But again, by the late 1860s, they'd used the resource.
Yeah. They've sort of mined it out, so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the convicts were also getting too old to handle the hard physical labour. So by 1863, a paupers depot was built, and then the asylum followed in 1864. What is interesting is those that died at Port Arthur were buried on the Isle of the Dead, which was a little offshore, and over 1,000 people were buried there.
Yeah.
One of the grave diggers on the island was a guy called Mark Jeffrey, who was a regular at Port Arthur because he had a bad temper. So they sent him to the Isle of Dead to keep away from other prisoners. And he was actually quite happy there. He quite happily doing his thing over on the Isle of Dead and digging graves and whatnot. But he said one night the devil visited him in his hut. He begged to be removed from the island and eventually died in Launceston. So we got a very different style of prison. We're not talking incarceration as we know it. We're talking a colony of convicts, a different kind of thing, right?
Yeah. I mean, you don't have to keep them really under lock and key because it's where it is. It's on the back end of the world, and it's sort of and you're stuck there. You can't really go anywhere else.
Mm. No, but you've got buildings. I mean, you've got again, you've got the tales of hauntings are there but in a different way. So you've got haunted bells, you've got, buildings, you've got it's incredibly different from a prison haunting because it is more a community style haunting, I
Yeah,
suppose, is the thing with it. So you've got moans of children and you've got disturbances and chills and all the usual kind of stuff. But they say that the biggest area or like the hot spot, as it were, for haunting is actually the parsonage.
yeah, yeah. The old vicar's house. It makes you wonder what he got up to.
Well, unexplained lights flickering, doors shut mysteriously, ghostly footsteps echo the halls, and the most famous spirit is that of the Reverend George Eastman, who served as parson at the island church during the 19th century. Not long after his death, they say that rumours of his ghost began to surface, and they could have there was a rotten smell, and moaning and strange noises, and the lights flickering. So I don't know, boys. I don't know.
Uh,
Oh, it seems to be. I've seen pictures of Port Arthur today. I mean, the main sort of prison blocks. And they're only a shell of what they actually were. But it is sort of a bit of a magnet down that way, sort of for paranormal investigators and stuff, and a lot of stuff. I mean, of all sort of like the prisons I looked into, I mean, Port Arthur seems to I mean, there's sort of record after record of sort of haunting events, sort of all over the place.
Mm.
But again, it does sort of like rely on the tourist industry, and it does, and they do their ghost hunts and ghost walks and stuff. So it's sort of all part and parcel of the Port Arthur experience.
yeah, and it's all suggestion as well, isn't it?
Well, I don't know whether it's suggestion. I mean, you've got these tales. I mean, some of them, they don't sound outlandish, sort of like with the parsonage, doors open and close, mysterious lights seen flickering in the windows. I mean, and they're quite benign. I mean, why people would want to make up something, and if you're going to make something up, you're going to make it sound a bit more exciting, surely.
Yeah.
Mm.
But
Don't know.
you're sort of hearing footsteps and stuff. I mean,
Yeah, but then
I've
when you're going around and you're being told, oh yeah, the paranormal activity is around here, you get to hear footsteps, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I can hear footsteps.
well, yeah,
Mm.
but
I mean, I've been on an investigation like that, and as the in-house paranormal team was taking us around, they were telling us things like that. They were saying like down these tunnels, people hear footsteps behind you, and there was a bloke behind me, one of the paranormal team that was showing us around, and then he was like, "Oh, can you hear that?" And I'm like, because I was standing at the back, I was like, "No, I can't hear nothing other than us walking
Mm.
this tunnel." And he was like, "Yeah, I can hear footsteps behind us." Well, she's just told us that, and now you're backing it up. But I think you're trying to
mm,
convince me that I heard it as well. And all I heard
Mm.
was us walking through the tunnel and the echo. It was like it
Mm.
was an echo, mate.
Well, on that note, we have actually come to the end of the first half of the show. So join us right after this.
Hello, Harry Price here. If there's nothing me and my friends enjoy more here on the other side, it is to sit back and relax and listen to the Paranormal Concept Show right here on the PAUK radio network, broadcasting a plethora of interesting and informative content for all your paranormal needs. Find them across social media to keep up to date with forthcoming shows and all their other adventures. Hello, is there anybody there?
And welcome back to the Paranormal Concept Show, exclusive to the Paranormal UK radio network. Now, tonight on the show, we are talking about haunted prisons, and we just have left. Where have we left?
Port Arthur down there in
Yeah.
Tasmania.
So we're going to come all the way back up to the UK, and we're going to take a little look at Bodmin Jail. Now, Bodmin Jail is incredibly infamous, right, guys?
It is. I've visited as well. It is really eerie.
I was going to say, what was your impression of it?
I actually enjoyed it, but it is quite a ruin of a prison. You have still got floors of the prison that's still intact, but there's one like major part of it that's just it's just the outside wall that's left. Everything inside's just collapsed. Um, I did actually have a row with someone about this, um, because in one of the windows of the prison, they've actually got a face mask. It's like a goblin type face mask,
Mm.
and someone said it was a ghost. And I was like, well, I've just been there and I've seen it in the window. It's a mask. I've seen it. And they're like, no, it's not. It's a ghost.
Okay.
Okay. Lock.
Very different now, though, isn't it?
Oh,
Yeah, half of it's been turned into a hotel, isn't it?
it has, yeah. That when I was there, they were actually refurbishing some of it, kind of hotel wise.
Mm.
So there wasn't too much of that. But yeah, it's a really good location. Definitely one to visit if
Hmm.
UK or nearby.
Yeah. It is located on the edge of Bodmin Moor in Cornwall, and it was originally built during the reign of King George III in 1779. Now, this was part of the Great Prison Reform, and it was built by a guy called Sir John Call, who is infamous as a military engineer.
Mm.
It used 20,000 tons of local Delank granite that is from the Cuckoo Quarry.
Yeah, cuckoo, cocoa, yeah,
Cuckoo.
cuckoo.
Cuckoo. My clock.
Yeah,
Right. So the design was based on the ideals of a prison reformer named Mr. John Howard, and it was first of the modern prisons in the UK with individual cells, segregated male and female areas, hot water, and light and airy areas for the prisoners to live and work. And they were paid for the work that they did, selling products that they made.
It is.
Prison numbers at Bodmin Jail were relatively low for the first 2 decades. By 1820, all the cells were filled with multiple occupants, and this caused overcrowding. So the jail had to be extended several times, with new buildings adding up to 1850. Now, changes were also needed due to several acts of Parliament stating total segregation of remand prisoners, convicted prisoners, felons, misdemeanants, debtors, vagrants, and of course the men from the women. So
yeah,
that results in 20 different classes of prisoners, each needing to be housed in separate sleeping areas and workshops.
yeah. Sounds like they're doing all right until these reforms come along. And they think,
Hmm.
oh, you know, and it automatically sort of deems the prison out of date, doesn't it? You know, they obviously build it to contain a set number, but again, as the years progress, population rises, you know, and so does crime, doesn't it?
It does. Between 1856 and 1861, Victoria's reign, yeah, an entirely new prison was built on the site. The original buildings were removed, and 220 cell total institution was built with separate wings for men and women, a chapel, a debtor's jail, and basically it was laid out by the reformers.
Hmm.
The needs of the society had also changed, don't forget, by then.
Yeah. You know, this is when they were talking, you know, like we have today, isn't it? You do have prisoners sort of graded into certain categories, don't you? They
You
tend to
do.
house them all together.
Now, it was largely a debtor's prison.
Hmm.
Basically, you owed money, you got put away if you couldn't pay it. In 1869, that changed because imprisonment for debt was actually abolished.
Yeah.
Right, so in 1887, the jail was used by the Royal Navy. They stayed there until 1922.
All right.
The female prison was. I love the way you sound so shocked about that, Richard, being as you're the one who did the research for this.
I'm just trying to add a bit of ooh.
The female prison was closed in 1911, and the inmates were the remaining inmates of women were then transferred to Plymouth, and the numbers of male prisoners actually declined dramatically with World War One. They shipped them all out to fight in the war, bless them.
Well, yeah. I mean, prisoners, you know, they would have been offered, you know, in times of trouble and stuff. Yeah, and it would have been another sort of thing the courts would have used. And if you were sort of caught for petty crime, you were given a choice of whether to go to prison or go into the military.
Yeah, exactly. Now, there was only one prisoner one male prisoner left in Bobbin Jail in July of 1916, and it was finally closed and decommissioned in 1927.
Right.
Okay. 55 executions took place there.
Mm-hmm.
Crimes for rape, murder, and stealing. 8 of these were women. Most of the executions were public. And as with the ones in London that we discussed, thousands would travel to witness the hangings.
Oh, right, yeah. No like good hanging, is there? To bring the crowds out.
The first 2 inmates were William Lee and John Vanstone. They were both convicted of burglary. And the last person was in 1909, was William Hampton, who basically killed his 17-year-old girlfriend after an argument. And he was also the last man to be hanged in Cornwall.
Oh, right.
Now, we know that this is a hotspot for paranormal investigations, right?
Yeah, definitely.
This was the location of the infamous Most Haunted outing of the famous psychic medium of Derek Cora.
Oh, yes, that caused a bit of a stir at the time, didn't it?
Certainly did. Now, parapsychologist Dr. Kieran O'Keefe was on location there with Derek, and he made up a African inmate called Creed Kafer. Now, basically, this is totally fictionalized by O'Keefe, and it's an anagram of Derek Faker.
Right.
All right, that was fed to him by the production staff, and he channeled Creed Kafer. And unfortunately, it made headline news, and that was the end of his Most Haunted career.
Yeah, so they literally just set him up.
They did. But if you are running or trying to run a credible television show and you have thoughts that your psychic medium is a fake, then that's one way of testing it.
Well, yeah, but then it was the actual TV show that I think copped that bad reputation after that, because no one believed that anything they did was right. Genuine. And they still haven't shaken that off, and they never will.
No.
And it isn't through that one medium either. It's through a lot of other things from the whole team. So,
Yeah, it was a bit of a shock to the system, I have to say, when all that came out.
yeah,
I mean, Derek Okora has since passed over himself now. Bodmin Jail is now a hotel.
Mm-hmm.
You still can investigate areas of it, but it has changed into a hotel now.
Yeah.
So, it still lives on, Bodmin Jail.
I still think the best ever episode was when they were looking for Jack the Ripper. No, well, Dick Turpin, wasn't it?
Yeah, Mary loves Dick.
Yeah, apparently so.
Apparently she does. That was so funny. I remember watching that live. I also remember Yvette Fielding getting stuck in the mud when they were doing Manning Tree on the hunt of Matthew Hopkins. That was hilarious as well. So, and Lost in the Woods at Epping Forest when they were on the hunt for Dick Turpin, same episode.
Yeah.
Absolutely hysterical. But
this is vast.
yeah. But it had, at the end of the day, it still has a huge following, Most Haunted, and has had some of the most memorable experience, of time, really. It's sort of a lot of people got into the field because of Most Haunted. So we can't knock it. And as I say, I can't knock Dr. Kieran O'Keefe, because at the end of the day, if you're looking for credible information, Derek Okora had an illustrious career after Most Haunted. He was still regarded as a fantastic psychic medium. Maybe money got the better of him.
Yeah.
His stature as a psychic medium, maybe he got a little bit.
I don't know. I don't think it was money orientated. I think it was just a production team.
But he took that and
I've
used that.
I've done events. Well, not an event as such, but I went to a quite highly respected radio station who wanted to do something for Halloween with their presenters, and they wanted to rig stuff. And I said I would only do it if they didn't rig anything. But when I was there and we was doing EVP sessions, the camera crew would bang on things, and I'd be like, just stop doing that. You know, it was irritating. You're trying to do a job like that, and you've got the production crew wanting to fake stuff to make a better episode, which you know, there isn't anything wrong with, because that's what they want to do. Ratings, but on the same time, you know, you tell them you don't want to do it, and then they do it anyway. When it just, I mean, it was only televised on their TV channel. I'm at 600. But it's, yeah.
Well,
more for them, and I never did it again.
Let's have a look at a couple of cases of a couple of the people that were executed at Bodmin Jail. A lady called Selina Wadge, Wadge, I'm going to say. She was a 27-year-old Victorian single mother. She had 2 disabled boys. So she had a really hard rap in life. Think of Victorian times. It's hard enough now when you've got that situation, let alone back then. Now, her youngest boy, Harry, was discovered dead. He was drowned in a well. Selina confessed to murdering him, but she said that the reason she did it was because her partner said he would only marry her if she disposed of her son. Now, he denied that. He said, nah. But Selina was actually hanged for it. And they say that her ghost still walks the corridors, and she lives her final days walking the halls, begging forgiveness for her crimes. Women have their hair grabbed, their hands clasped. She makes herself visible to people with children. The children are saying, you know, like, who's the lady in the long dress that won't stop crying, mum? Pregnant people that have wandered like around Bodmin Jail have been affected. And basically, it's an emotional projection, they say, from Selina that is the reason for that. So she obviously regrets doing what she did for whatever she did it. She's very prevalent on the 3rd and 4th floors, apparently. That's one of the ghosts that's supposed to haunt it. Now, there is lots of other things. Intense feelings of being watched. And that goes through the entire building, actually.
Yeah.
The strongest place is in the condemned cells. I believe they are still there, and you can investigate those still.
Yeah.
I don't know. Now that's where you would obviously be put the night before you were about to be hung.
Yeah, in the condemned cells, yeah, they move you, yeah, but it's usually right next to the gallows, yeah.
And people feel like they've been strangled or choked when they do that now. A young man was hanged in the grounds in 1844 for the murder of 18-year-old Charlotte Dimmond at the nearby Rough Tor. Basically, one look at her body was enough to convince the police that the girl had been murdered. Her throat had been cut not just once but twice. Now, 22-year-old Weeks was arrested for the crime. He gave a full confession, and many believe that he was innocent of the crime. So he's supposed to wander the corridors of Bodmin.
Yeah.
And he's said to be one of the most active spirits.
Right, yeah, there's a couple of sort of classic ghost stories there, isn't there? You've got the, you know, 2 people sort of innocently condemned, haven't you? And so
they say.
Yeah.
Yeah, but aren't all prisoners
full of innocent people?
Yeah.
The spirit of Annie Jeffries is supposed to be there as well. She was said to be a witch, and that she starved herself to death. Now, apparently it took her 3 months to die, and that basically reinforced everyone's belief that she was actually in league with the devil. We also have a priest He has been witnessed in the chapel area of the jail. Thin, frail man, don't know his identity. He's been seen in a particular cell. George, a one-time warder of the prison, he died on duty of a heart attack, has been witnessed. You hear phantom keys, and I think George could be responsible for that.
Yeah.
Now, on the 5th floor, now, have you heard of a ghost hunter called Tony Ferguson?
No.
I haven't, no.
I have.
All right.
This guy is... he said he captured the ghost of King Henry VIII.
Right.
Okay.
I watched the video footage. It was an orb.
All right. Okay.
This is probably why I've not heard of him. If anyone that says anything about orbs, it's like face palm, not interested by.
Yeah. I was really looking forward to seeing the ghost of King Henry VIII, and I saw an orb, and I was like, really? Really?
Yeah.
Anyway. He is quite prolific in the paranormal field. That's, goes without saying. Now, him and his wife were the only visitors to the prison at the time when the footage was captured. He claims they heard banging and scratching sounds and saw shadows before they'd even set up the camera. He thinks he caught the figure of William Hampton, who was the last inmate to be hanged for his crimes.
Okay.
This is the problem, isn't it?
Can you hear my cherries?
Yeah.
How does he know? Did the ghost come forward and say,
I'm not-
hi?
I'm not denying he may have caught something paranormal, but to put it down to an actual individual, is
A jump of assumption.
is pushing it a bit. It takes away from sort of the footage they've actually captured, I think. If he had just said, we caught this, it's interesting, possibly it looks like a manifestation or an apparition. Yeah. What do you think?
I don't know. I haven't seen the footage, to be fair.
No.
I've seen other footage that he's put out there.
Okay.
And I would put him in the parafane bracket.
Yeah, those people really wind me up.
Personally, but at the end of the day, he's out there doing what we all do, so can't really complain, right? So let's have a look at Kilmainham Jail in Dublin. We're going all the way over to Ireland for this fun. Little Irish accent popping out there.
Yeah.
Now, it is significant as the site of the executions of the 1916 leaders of the independent struggle.
Yeah,
Richard?
very time. Yeah, during the Easter Rising of 1916, when these independence movement people took over the telephone exchange in Dublin, I think, sort of like demanding independence, and there was about, I don't know, there was a 2 or 3 day siege of the telephone exchange. And when it was over, they rounded up the ringleaders, took them to the jail, and executed them in the courtyard. Pretty like a kangaroo court was set up, and they just basically shot them.
Now, it was originally and primarily served as a place of confinement for common criminals. Now, in the 18th century, we're looking at cruelty and squalor as red, basically, for these kind of places. But Kilmainham was supposed to be different. It was inspired by ideas of the Enlightenment. So again, we've got a modern facility. I love this way you're sounding so shocked.
No, I say, it's sort of, again, sort of an attempt at reform, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's like this movement over to Reformation. So you've got the separation, the hygiene work going on there, all about reforming prisoners so they were safely released back into society. Now, it was opened in 1796 by Sir John, or designed by Sir John Trail. It had an entrance and administration block to the north and a spine block running north to south. And to each side, the cells set around 2 central yards, a series of yards dedicated to specific activities or types of prisoner were arranged around the cell blocks. It has high limestone walls with bastions to the 4 corners. So that sings to your little soul there, Rich, doesn't it?
Yes.
The present entrance block, with its heavily rusticated and vermiculated stonework and chained hydra. That's a mythical, going back to the serpent thing. The serpents are coming up a lot, right?
Yeah.
All right.
That's over the door. That's part of the original building.
All right.
But the 2 wings on either side of the entrance court were later additions.
Okay.
There was a stonebreaker's yard. There were public hangings, and they were from directly above the doorway. So the combination of the hydra in chains and the hanged emphasised the control of those who threatened society.
Yeah.
The
Like a
prison.
warning. Yeah.
Yep, a warning. Grrr, hydra. Grrr. The prison soon became overcrowded, and the cells built for one obviously ended up holding multiple prisoners. Now, in 1840, a block of 30 cells were added to the west wing. But again, we then have a massive issue in the society because we have the Great Famine.
Yeah.
And in times of austerity within a population, crime goes up. That's like a natural thing. And so the population went up. So, the 30 cells weren't enough, basically. A lot of the imprisonments at that time are food-related offences.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in times of mass famine, which we had in Ireland, absolutely disgusting period of time, basically, their rations were reduced to a minimum.
Yeah.
So, to deal with the overcrowding, they demolished the East Wing, and then they built in 1861 a 3-storey over basement wing, which basically was designed by a guy called John McCurdy. And this is classic Victorian prison design. And it's about observation and control. So the prison staff have a central point where they can view every cell door in the block.
Yeah, they use. Yeah, again, it's like spokes of the wheel. The hub will be where the prison guards are, and the spokes. So you've got a unfettered view right down to the end of each cell block.
Yeah, the prison finally closed in 1910. It opened 6 years later as a detention centre after the Rising. So it continued right up until the end of the Civil War, basically. Yeah. And then in between 1924 and 1960, it was ruined. It was in ruins. So there are photographs out there from the 1950s.
Right.
They show it in a state of dilapidation, basically. Various proposals were put forward regarding the building and what to do with it, because now it's becoming a danger. And the Kilmainham Jail Restoration Committee was established in 1960. They wanted it opened and restored for the 50th anniversary of the Rising. And it was actually opened in 1966 by President de Valera. That was the last prisoner there.
All right.
Now, they managed to, they continued to manage it up until 1986 when it was handed over to the state.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Now, while the restoration work was going on, Governor Dan McGill moved into the old warders' quarters to oversee the work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, he says one night he'd secured the property, turned all the lights off, returned to his quarters. He looked out the window and he noticed that the lights were still on in the chapel. But he said, I turned them off. I know I did, right? So he found that he went to check. The chapel was empty. He doubly made sure that the lights were turned off as he left. When he went back to his quarters, the lights were on once again in the building. So basically, Backwards and forwards he went, turning the lights off each time. And then every time he got back to his quarters, they were turned back on again. So he left it to it. He said, like, whatever,
Yeah.
right? Get on with it then. I'm not going to do it again. Workers heard footsteps approaching and passing them whilst they were at work. They had a sensation of something passing through them at various times as well. They heard the sounds of soldiers marching in a deserted area. And one particular workman had a hands-on encounter whilst working in the dungeons. He was painting. He was suddenly thrown across the room and pinned to the wall by an unseen force. He struggled for a few moments before making his escape, but he said, I'm never going back there again. I don't blame him. And we still have those kind of phenomena happening today.
Right. Yeah. It'd be an interesting place to go and visit.
Yeah.
It is. It's a very interesting place, isn't it?
Now, again, it's a tourist spot, so you can go and have a look at it, right? So you get the tourist reports and the tour guides saying it, and you hear disembodied voices, doors slamming, people being shoved by hands, a malevolent presence in the chapel. All sorts of weird and wonderful things are said to be happening at this particular place. Interesting, I say.
Yeah, I mean, nothing too dramatic, is there? Well, apart from the poor soul that was thrown across the dungeon, but sort of quite sort of usual types of activity. I mean, many people always sort of claim the footsteps and unexplained lights sort of switching themselves and on and off. I mean, that is quite sort of standard sort of paranormal experiences, aren't they?
The problem I have with that is like electricity. It could be just a fault.
Could be a fault, yeah.
You got
True.
old buildings, all these prisons, they're old buildings. They've been mucked about with a lot, built, rebuilt, added to. It must be a poxy nightmare trying to do any work in these kind of places. And the age as well. I mean, like a lot of places that have, I mean, nowadays it's a lot different, isn't it, because of the regulations, but back then they didn't have, and although that gets replaced over time, they are restricted in regards to how you can lay wires and stuff. So I think with these old buildings, it probably is a high percentage of chance that you would have an electrical fault.
Yes, true. But going back, they always say that paranormal activity, well, and we always say, is always heightened after renovations are done. And these prisons were constantly under a state of renovation or rework from the days they were first opened.
Mm-hmm.
And, you could argue that as well, couldn't you?
You could argue that as well. I don't know, Paul. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think, like, as Richard said about the renovation thing. I don't think, like, from somewhere that's been renovated right from the off
Mm-hmm.
after newly being built. I don't think you're going to get too much activity. But for somewhere that's had, so again, it's energy and emotion, isn't it?
Mm.
Been going through that place for a very long time. And maybe that's something that can be disturbed.
Yeah, it's like you say, we were saying at sort of like the start. I mean, if any places are to be said to be allegedly hauntings, I mean, prisons are, and you do subscribe to the theory of emotion being captured somehow and replayed. Prisons are a natural place to go, aren't they?
Mm.
Yeah, especially with the history.
Especially like the older ones, like the Dana Jail, Shrewsbury, that actually hung people.
Well, yeah, I mean, all early prisons, they would have hung people in them. They would have had the ultimate punishment. sudden death. You got that as well, and inmates sort of murdering other inmates. I mean, it has all the sort of it has all the ingredients there to be haunted.
Yeah.
Mm. It's a fascinating idea that emotion is imprinted through experience of trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the the thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, there has to be something going on. I mean, I don't believe all these sort of stories we've covered tonight. I mean, a fair proportion of them possibly can be explained, but you've got a sort of basic undercurrent. There's a theme going on, isn't there?
Mm.
Sort of what have all these places got in common? Well, they're all made and built specifically to incarcerate people.
Yeah.
And to deal out, the ultimate punishment as well, of execution. So, and innocent people would have been imprisoned there as well. So you've got that sort of frustration and sort of lying around in the ether as well, because I can't think of anything worse than being locked up and if you're innocent, or paying the ultimate price if you're innocent.
Mm. It's a difficult one to call. I don't know. I think you do have to consider the varying scenarios in regards to, we've talked about this time and time again, haven't we, in regards to the time period, the conditions that people were surrounding themselves in.
Yeah.
They're forbidding places, whatever way you want to look at it. All of these, although they're like now museum places, you can go and visit them, they're still forbidding, and they have that imprint of that historical reference on them. So I do think you have to be a bit worrisome in regards to your personal reaction to them. We know places can be oppressive and affect you emotionally without it being psychically haunted. I don't know, but we have actually come to the end of the show, boys.
Oh, right. That went quick.
Yeah. On that note, any last words?
Check out some of our previous shows as we've done. Was it new? Oh, what was that prison we done before?
Newgate.
Newgate. That's it. I know beginning.
That's right back at the beginning, though, folks. So you'll have to
Yeah.
go right back. Actually, if you go onto Spreaker and look up the Paranormal Concept Show, there is a separate channel with older shows on it. It might be easier to find. There's also blogs on our website. Go check them out.
Yeah.
And don't forget to check us out on the socials at Paranormal Concept Show. We will be back with you next week with another show on a different topic. I think we're looking at Tudors next week, aren't we?
The dissolution of the monasteries.
Dissolution of the monasteries.
Definitely.
Join us for that one and see how it relates to paranormal activity. Take care. Say goodnight, boys.
Good night, boys.
Good night, boys.